Hello. To everyone listening, in this episode of What's It Like, we talk to Josh, who is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist. Before we start, we just want to say that this episode is in no way, shape, or form professional advice or guidance. Additionally, we discuss some topics in this episode that may cause distress to some listeners, such as death or substance abuse. That being said, viewer discretion is advised. Hello, sir.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. It's exciting to finally get this rolling. We had a lot of technical issues behind the scenes, but we are here now.
Just a little bit of troubleshooting later.
Just a little bit. So, this is another mediocre attempt at what we call a podcast here at the Common Tongue Podcasts. I have a very, very special guest. I have been planning this for almost what seems like a month now. Would you please state your name and what you do for the record?
My name is Joshua Opatowsky. I am a licensed clinical social worker in the states of California and Oklahoma, and soon to be Maryland as soon as I submit all my paperwork. And I currently function as a full-time psychotherapist on the online platform BetterHelp.
Alrighty then. Well, this should be interesting. But we are also doing this on Twitch. But he's also going to do his intro. We might keep it in, we might not. We'll see. You might have to watch the Twitch stream VOD for flavor's sake, but we'll see what happens.
All right, you want me to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Welcome to Unigeek, the geek universe for the universal geek. I'm Ani Yoshi, and tonight I am going to be recording a podcast in which I talk about myself a whole bunch. So you're in here for the ride with me. We're going to stay in big camera mode because there's nothing to look at unless I wanted to try to podcast and play a game simultaneously, which I probably would be successful in doing, but I feel like that kind of takes away from my focus on the experience. So I'm just going to talk for now.
Well, to be fair, this show is a show that we call What's It Like? And the premise of this show is that, we do basic information about people to try and bridge gaps in understanding. So, as many of the people who watch you probably know that you're a social worker, but not a lot of people really understands what that means. So the reason why we do these shows is basically to try and, I guess, educate people and show them behind the scenes of what exactly goes on to being a social worker and being a psychotherapist.
Yeah, because I think that people probably understand a little more about what it means to be a psychotherapist, but not necessarily what it means to be a social worker and go down that path, just because there are many states in our ever so wonderful union that do not provide what's called title protection to social workers. So in those states where title protection is not policy, anybody who wants to, in any job position that can title itself social worker, can be a social worker and can call themselves that.
Interesting. So man, this is going to be very interesting because I know almost nothing about social work. So I guess to start it off, how did you get started on the path of being a social worker? I guess, like being a psychotherapist and being a social worker.
So there are two segments to this, because there's the personal journey and the educational journey, which are both, of course, educational and informative. For people who want to pursue social work, obviously the educational path is going to be the more informative one for them. But a lot of my push into social work came from, I guess, collegiate exploration. So just like in my college career.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of, focusing in and honing in on the psychology element, because that's actually what I originally applied for major-wise when I went to my first four-year college out of community college. And before I even started the psychology program, I actually changed my mind because I'd been looking at other programs. And where I went to school, Cal State University, Monterey Bay.
Oh, nice.
Had a program called Social and Behavioral Sciences.
Okay, yeah. I recognize behavioral sciences. Yeah, that I mean a lot of people probably would.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, this is interesting because it's a broader category than just psychology. So I might learn a greater breadth of information and from different perspectives.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
fair.
switched it up and started school in that program instead. And that program was very unique in its offerings. So it didn't require that many core classes in order to get all the credits necessary to graduate with that degree. And they encouraged you to pick a specific focus within the social and behavioral sciences to take the rest of your classes, essentially.
Right, so
So
like an
you could
emphasis.
focus, yeah, so you could focus on sociology or physical or cultural anthropology or archaeology or GIS, which is global information systems, or history from a teaching perspective, which was very interesting.
Okay.
There were only a couple people who went that route, and they all got to use a different paper formatting style. They got to use Chicago instead of APA for the rest of us.
God, I'm not a fan of Chicago. That's a weird segment, but I used APA for like the majority of my college career, and Chicago just is weird. It's not entertaining at all.
And I know nobody on the podcast can see it, but on my Twitch stream right now, I'm now holding up my APA 7th edition publication manual that I literally keep on my desk.
Wow, you're a huge nerd.
Well, I'm a doctoral student, so I'm writing a lot.
Okay, that's also fair, yeah. I don't think I ever once even saw that book. Everything was like Purdue Owl, like, and that was where everybody got their, APA Chicago MLA stuff from.
Yeah, and that was typical of undergrad. I have one professor who's like, yeah, that's okay, and one professor who's like, absolutely do not use Purdue Owl ever.
You have to buy the book.
And it's useful to buy the book. I mean, it's good for about 10 years at a time. I actually do have my 6th edition over on the bookshelf, I realized, from my master's program, because I got that in 2012.
Wow.
So.
Man, 2012, I hadn't even graduated high school then. If that gives you any perspective out there.
Yeah, 2012 is when I started my master's program. I was 22.
Wow.
So
okay, so let's get back on track now. We're very tangential right now. So
yeah, I'm good at that. But this is relevant.
This is all very relevant.
It's all relevant to my social work journey. Because one of the things that happened right after I started my program was that some of my professors were like, "You're amazing at writing." I was like, "Oh, well, that's cool. Thank you." And a lot of what happens in social work is paperwork and documentation. So it really does help that I'm good at that.
Well, I guess there's a difference between writing and like form filling.
Yes. But a lot of my note taking,
right,
and even my note taking now is just for me.
Yeah.
Because what I do online is not an insurance billable service, so I don't have to be beholden to anybody. But when I was working in an outpatient mental health clinic, everything had to be form fitting for billing to Medicare and Medi-Cal, which is California Medicaid for those who are not in California. California likes its own unique stuff, and even Orange County, California, has its own version of Medi-Cal called CalOptima.
California special.
Dig into insurance stuff. Yeah, fun stuff.
So you started your program, and then they complimented your writing.
That was a nice piece for me to know that there were a lot of options available to me as a social scientist. And I dug into research really quick. Like that really latched on for me. And I really enjoy being able to do research and looking through journal articles and finding relevant information and going down what I have coined as the research rabbit hole, which is when you look at a piece of research and then you use the references that article has cited to find additional references, and then you keep going until you find something really awesome.
Oh, no, that's a real thing. Like, so I graduated with my degree in linguistics, and that was a huge thing. Like you'd hear this one thing about how Utah, linguistics stole bits and pieces and flipped around what, Texas people sound like when they speak. And then you're like, wait a minute, that's not right. And then, half of my professors have papers written on this that are cited in this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it's a black hole. Like you can search for hours and keep finding stuff on it. So I absolutely understand that.
Okay. And I could have easily taken that off track right now based on what I'm doing right now, but I'm not going to. So back on track. So out of all those foci, the choices that I had in my major, I chose none of them and minored in social work instead.
Okay.
Because originally,
aren't you
the rebel there?
The black sheep of the program.
And it's funny because I'm seeing the recording software in front of me, and one of my little recording bits looks like a TIE fighter. It's great. It's heading toward the left side of the screen right now. Yeah, I'm easily.
This is why I love this. This is so much fun. I have so much fun with this.
So
okay. Anyway, so you were the black sheep because you decided to minor in social work.
Yes, and I did that because I was looking at the different areas of focus, and at that point, I still wanted to work with children very specifically, and I wanted to do therapy with children, and there weren't really any areas of focus within that program that would lead me to that. So I decided to expand my breadth. So was there any
reason for that? Was there any reason for that emphasis, particularly with children, like wanting to work with children?
Yes. So I spent a lot of time going on to the personal side out of the educational side with my my late best friend who passed away back in 2011 in a children's hospital. She didn't pass away in a children's hospital, but I spent a lot of time with her in at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and became very motivated by the people who worked with her, and also some of the social workers that she had in her life as a child and adolescent, because she was also not only chronically ill due to a genetic illness called cystic fibrosis, she also was a foster youth. So she was...
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so for context, anybody who wants to know more about this story, there is a VOD on Kawaii Guy's Twitch channel, and you and John had both done an episode on this, and you went into full detail about this story. I remember this because I
talked for 45 minutes about it.
Yeah. So if anybody wants anything, look up. You'll have to search through the VOD for it, but there's a full episode of Kawaii Guy on Twitch talking with Josh, and Josh does a full explanation on this. So I understand the context here. Now we can continue.
Yes. So she was a very meaningful presence in my life. I met her when I was 8 in 4th grade, and saw her sporadically throughout my school career, but not for a while after that until middle school, because I was also homeschooled. But still, and it's funny because I remember how I met her, because she asked me what was on my head. I always used to wear a yarmulke, so that was a way a lot of people met me.
What's that thing on your head, man? What? It's a little cap. It's cute.
When you grow up in a non-religiously diverse space, people ask what you're wearing on your head.
I mean, that's probably fair. I'd imagine that happened quite a bit then.
Yeah, and I embraced that as a positive element of my identity, because people made it as such, which was really nice. Now, most of the interactions I had because of that were positive.
Well, that's good.
But so, yeah, okay. Jumping back in, I spent a lot of time with my best friend in the hospital, because that was just her normal, whether she was going in once a month to do all of her regular labs and checkups, or she was hospitalized for something as simple as a cold that led to more because she had a suppressed immune system due to having a bilateral lung transplant at age 16.
Yeah.
So
that probably would do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And once you have an organ transplant, you take medication to suppress your immune system so that your body doesn't say, hey, those don't belong here, get them out.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, there were lots of those moments, lots of my own naivete now that we're in a time where we're all wearing masks, that I realized that I really should have been wearing a mask more often in the hospital for her own safety, not really for mine.
Hindsight is 2020, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. Of course, I also wore glasses at the time and hated wearing a mask. It was very uncomfortable. So thanks, pandemic, for happening after I got LASIK.
Well, there you go. Yeah. See, I'm living with that. I have glasses, and I love wearing glasses. Like contacts annoy me, so I'm like, all right, I'll find a way to suffer through this.
Yeah, I never wore contacts.
Yeah, they're. I don't recommend it to all you out there who have the fortitude to wear contacts all the time. I don't see how you do it. It bugs me. I don't like the feeling. But anyway, again, tangential.
Yeah. My dad, who's an eye surgeon, wears contacts way longer than he's supposed to. But hey, whatever.
Oh, that's anyway. So, friend, hospital.
Yes. So I
You were there a lot.
spent a lot of time there. Eventually, she transferred out of when she was 21. Transferred out of Children's Hospital to USC University Hospital, which is the hospital that she did pass away in. But that transition was made when she turned 21, and so she was at that other hospital for a little over a year. And actually, that was that time spent in that second hospital at USC that really solidified my choice to become a social worker. So I met a social worker who had just gotten his license, and he was the transplant floor social worker. So there was a whole floor that was just dedicated to transplant patients.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
post-transplant patients, because it's safer to kind of keep everybody in a bubble if they all have compromised immune systems.
That makes that checks out.
And it's like putting all the people with COVID in the same unit.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So I got to talk to him because he came into my best friend's room when she wasn't there. She was getting some sort of procedure done or something, and he introduced himself as a social worker, and I was like, oh, I'm considering going that direction. And he's like, oh, and so we talked for about 15 minutes, which felt rare because he's he's an employee and he's doing his job, but he talked to a visitor instead of a patient for 15 minutes. And at the end of the conversation, he was like, I see a lot of myself in you, like when I was first starting out, and that was super motivating. Also, just there aren't a lot of males in social work, period. It's a very female dominated profession, just like nursing, just like most helping professions are. So it was nice to see that perspective reflected back at me, even though, I'm used to being the most, at least somewhat, as a white guy, like most represented in a lot of things, but not in my profession.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was really meaningful. I think, at that point, I think I'd already probably started applying to go to grad school, but it
For
even,
social work?
yeah, I think I'd already started that process, but I feel like any big process that you start like that, there's always some uncertainty about whether or not you're doing what you really want to do. And
right,
that solidified it for me. I also didn't get
so
in.
that conversation was like the final nail in the coffin for you.
Yes. I also didn't get into grad school the first year I applied, so I had time to think about it further anyway. But it was also my downfall of only applying to one school, and it happened to be one that was impacted. But there's a whole other story behind that I'm not going to get into.
That's not really helping my desires to go to grad school then, because I have one school that I would like to apply to, and only one school that I'm looking at. So, well, thanks for that. I appreciate that help.
It was specifically Cal State Los Angeles, and their social work program is always impacted because they have a lot of people who want to become social workers in that space because there's a lot of need.
I imagine in California there's a need for it too.
Yeah, there's a lot of need, and especially in South LA County, in your historically downtrodden areas, and the more ethnically diverse areas and poorer areas that are surrounding that campus, essentially. So it makes sense that social work would be a big deal there.
Okay, because I lived in East LA, so I lived in like the Glendale side of Los Angeles. So you're talking more about? Are you talking more about
like
the Compton,
South Central,
Irvine side?
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that like Compton and the surrounding communities.
No, yeah. So yeah, then that makes sense to me because, for one, living in California by itself is stressful. Like the cost of living is absolutely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That makes sense that, there's a greater need for it because, people are probably a lot more, I don't know, because the way that I think about it is like when I think social work, or when I imagine when most people think social work, they think of, CPS, Child Protective Services.
Yeah.
They don't think about the social workers who work in the hospitals and the social workers who work in, the unemployment office, who help out people finding jobs and such.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That
So yeah,
is,
and
yeah.
this is helpful because it's opening those doors. Like, cool, there's other social workers out there than those who take your children away from you.
And a lot of the time, like I was saying, those aren't even actual social workers by profession, like by expertise.
Really?
California does not have title protection.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we mentioned that. Yeah. So anybody can just, wow.
Anybody can
That's got to be it.
wear a badge that says social worker on it without a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate in social work.
They just have to apply for the job and get accepted.
Yep.
That's terrifying.
And there was actually legislation to push through a bill for title protection while I was in school to become a social worker, and it didn't go through, which is surprising for California, honestly.
That's terrifying. Okay. Anyway, so back to school. So this conversation was the turning point for you in terms of like, wanting to pursue the master's in social work, right?
Yeah.
So what
even
happened
though
after that?
I'd already applied. So that conversation was probably either late 2010 or early 2011. I can't remember exactly, but that would have been, halfway through my senior year of college, or the beginning of my second half of senior year, where I would have applied and already been closer to hearing back. But so going through that year, I had a year off and I wanted to use it productively. So I volunteered at my local children's center and got acquainted with some people who did therapy with children already. Even though most of my time spent there was with doing some filing and working the front desk and helping entertain children while their parents were, because when they did family therapy sessions, and they would do like just with the parent and then just with the child and then all the whole family together.
Well, I mean, at least you were there, you
Yeah.
were in the environment of where you wanted to work.
Yeah. And it was nice to donate my time there. And then I also ended up getting a job at a computer repair place, which taught me how to build a computer, useful skill. Really glad I learned how to do that.
Which I am lacking in that skill. So you're up on me on that too.
And it's easier than you think, honestly.
No, I imagine it is, but it seems like a daunting task.
Just thinking about it, it does, especially if you build the whole thing and then it doesn't turn on the way you expect, or something is not working.
That's what I'm anyway. Now that's a whole other conversation as well. So okay, so you got the job at the computer shop.
Yeah. So, and I kept volunteering a little bit, but then I wanted to actually put some money into savings, and also my goal was to propose to my now wife before we left for our respective master's programs. So going
Makes
through the
sense.
year at that point, there's a little more story before that, but because going through the year, I essentially found out that my best friend was going to die 3 months before she died. I didn't know when, but yeah.
This is the friend with cystic fibrosis. Yep.
Yes. So she was essentially told at that point, you would need another new set of lungs and new kidneys to survive. And because my father is a physician and I talked to him about everything about the goings on about her health, because I cared about her dearly, and I had some insider information as to what to expect at any given time. And he said, no surgeon's going to do that. That's not realistic. She's already been deemed as non-compliant, because it was the reason she had gotten so sick was that she didn't take her medications for a few days because she had gone into a major depressive episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I just had to kind of mentally prepare myself for, whenever the end is when it is. So I think that was September of 2011. A month later, I started the relationship with my now wife. We had already known each other for 7 years at that point.
Oh, wow.
Because I met her when I was a sophomore in high school, and our parents used to live 1.5 miles from each other.
So you grew up with her not grew up with her, but you knew her very well.
Yeah, at that point, I knew her very well. It's funny. I have a little kindergarten yearbook and her name's in it because she was going to preschool, the same place I went to kindergarten. So
it's adorable. It's a match made in heavens. You were high school sweethearts and everything worked out.
I mean, we actually dated in high school and it didn't work out. And then we tried again later on when we were actually mature adults, more so.
Well, that's rare.
Yeah.
You're one of the lucky ones, sir. I applaud you for that. I'll give 2 short claps. There you go. That's all you get.
Thank you.
Anyway.
So yes, about 2 months before her death, I started my relationship with my wife, who was a big support when that did happen. She passed away on Christmas of 2011, which as a Jew, not as meaningful to me, but meaningful to most people in her life. Pretty big downer for everybody. I got to help plan her memorial service. I got to pick her photo for her obituary. So I felt like I got to preserve some of what she would want, just because a lot of her wishes were not fulfilled upon her death, for a variety of annoying reasons, related to her birth mother, just because custody was never fully terminated. So she had precedence over what happened with her body.
So basically it was a complicated mess. Yeah,
a little bit. Eventually, birth mom gave in and let us do what we wanted for the most part. There was a lot in her memorial service of Jesus, and she was not a religious person at all. So, like, I normally would have been comfortable with it.
No, so I understand that. So it was more like the forced religion when she didn't believe it, but her mom wanted it.
Yeah, that was the part that I was.
Man, that's got to be rough, especially for you, since you were so close to her. You were a major part of when she was in the hospital, when she was sick, and then to go through all this and like to see that happen, that must have been hard on you.
Yeah, it was frustrating just that her mother didn't believe us, the people who had been spending, years of our lives with her, and instead was like, no, well, she always wore this necklace with a cross on it because someone important in her life gave it to her. And it wasn't about what it represented spiritually, it was about what it represented with her relationship with the person who gave it to her. So she took that out of context, but her mom also had a lot of issues of her own that were
which you might be able to help her as a social worker, because that's what you do.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so
nowadays, yes.
So then so she passed.
Yeah. So we moved into 2012 and I got accepted into school, still working at the computer shop, getting a little bit of money. And then I proposed to my now wife on July 15th. So just about a month before we went off to school at Disneyland, which was nice.
That's romantic.
Yeah, at the wishing well.
Unpopular opinion here. I'm going to pop this in here for a minute. Disney's not that great. I grew up in Florida and I went to Disney a lot because my friend's dad worked there. But it's in my honest opinion, for everybody who's going to give me hate for it, it's not that great.
Yeah, I respect your opinion.
I say go once, have the experience, and then that's it. You're done.
I've been to Disneyland a good few hundred times, so.
God.
But I lived there. I mean, I lived 2 miles from Disneyland for 3 years and had annual passes. So.
Okay, well then, yeah. If you have it, then yeah, do it. But like for me, that's a whole nother conversation. We could do a whole episode on that just by itself.
Yeah.
Anyway, so did you and your wife both go to school in the same state, at least?
Yes, we were about 100 miles apart.
Yeah, 100 miles. Okay, that's not exactly the answer I was expecting, but continue.
So she was in Los Angeles and I was in Bakersfield.
Okay, I know where that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were only a couple freeways disconnected from each other over the course of, about an hour and 45-minute drive, depending on traffic. So it wasn't too bad, but we generally only saw each other about once a month during our school time, living at our I lived in an apartment off campus. She was an RA for both years because it paid for her housing and her food, which was
because you were both engaged at this point. You weren't married yet. Okay, yeah,
correct. Because both of our parents, my parents and hers, had the principle of once you're married, you're financially independent. So we said, well, it makes more sense to get married after we're done with school anyway, just so we can solidify that this is definitely what we want to do, and also gives us 2 years of built-in wedding planning. So that was nice.
I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So yeah, so 2 years of school was my master's program. Word to the wise, if you can and want to pursue social work as far as master's level social work, and you could have as few responsibilities as possible while you're in your master's program, they'll tell you it's going to be super difficult. Like at the beginning, the orientation, they told me to like kiss my friends and family goodbye and say, I'll see you in 2 years. And that's not what happened to me at all. I felt like my program was pretty easy. Like I felt somewhat intellectually challenged at times, but most of the time it wasn't significantly difficult for me, which I may have, some bias in that I know I'm a good writer and that's really helpful in higher education in general. But yeah, I thought it was easier than I anticipated, and that they made it sound like it would be.
Right. So like they hyped it up to make it this big scary thing, and then when you got there, you were like, no, this isn't too bad.
Yeah, and I was one of the very few people with that perspective, because most of the other people in the program had other responsibilities, whether they were working part-time or had existing families with children or things like that. So
okay. So wait, how many people were in the program where you went to school for the master's in social work?
So my cohort was 38 people.
Okay. So that's a little more than I was expecting.
And that didn't include part-timers.
So that was just the full-time students.
Yeah, that was my full-time cohort. The part-timers, it's a 3-year program, and full-timers, it's a 2-year program. And that also, of course, doesn't include people who were in their second year when I was in my first year.
Right. Okay. So when you got into your second year, you had people who were coming into as their first year.
Correct.
So it's just like that ongoing cycle. Okay.
We're just not, we're not in any of the same classes, because master's level, everything's dictated for you.
Right. Yeah.
Like, this is what you take in this order, because it's only offered once.
Man, you must have had fun in college.
It was nice in undergrad, like looking back from master's level, where you everything's just dictated, and it's the same at doctoral level now for me. It's like, this is what you're taking. Here's exactly everything outlined, so that you know pretty much what you're going to be doing each semester.
Well, I guess, yeah, then that makes sense. Because, like, so when I was looking at the master's program for linguistics, that was the same thing. Like, I looked at Limerick College in Ireland. I looked at the University of Oregon at Eugene, even at Brigham Young University here in Utah, where I got my undergrad. And it was the same. Like, they were like, okay, these are the classes who you're going to take. This is the research that you're going to be writing with. You have to pick an emphasis. You have to pick a chair, and you have to write this, and you have to focus on this. And then everything basically is dictated for you, but there is some wiggle room with what you want to work on.
Yeah.
So I imagine it was probably the same for you.
Yeah. And with my master's program, a thesis was not mandatory.
Oh, that must be nice.
Yeah. So you had the option of doing 2 quarters of thesis focused class, where you would work with an advisor one-on-one, essentially, or you could take elective courses, essentially. And there were actually, so we did get a choice in that manner. There were, I think, 4 or 5 different choices. I ended up taking a gerontology focused course, so social work with older adults. And I took what was called issues in child maltreatment. So looking at the more child protective services sides of things.
Mm-hmm. So the more working with children side that you wanted to work in.
Yeah, at that point still felt like that's what I wanted to do, because that was still the tinge that I was feeling.
Right, it was still very much at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah, and here I am, 6 years post graduation, and I've still never actually really worked in a meaningful way with children. I've worked with some adolescents, some teenagers in therapy.
Well, we will get to that, because I imagine it's leading up to that. So then you finished your master's. Was there anything in particular that impacted you during your master's program that was like, oh, like this is what actual social work is?
So my internships during my master's program, my first year, because I told them I wanted to work in a hospital. So I was pretty dead set on wanting to work in a hospital. Like, my dream at that point was, I want to work at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Like, that would be really meaningful for me to be able to give back to that place that I spent so much time, just as a guest, not even as a patient, and never as a patient. They put me on their sort of medical track, where they decided to start me off in a methadone clinic. And I know not everybody is familiar with what that is, so I will explain it briefly. So a methadone clinic is a treatment option for people with opiate addiction, including heroin. And it is opiate replacement therapy is what it's called. And essentially you are replacing the actual opiate for a substitute lab-made, man-made opiate that fills the opiate receptor in the brain, so that if you were to try to take something that is an actual opiate, it would not have any impact on you, and it would not impact your brain because the receptors are already filled by the methadone, which is the synthetic opiate.
Wow. I can't even imagine working in a place like that. What was that like? Like, and I know, because now this is where I get really interested. It's like, what was that entire experience like?
Very intimidating at first, also very tiring because they open at 5 a.m. And they closed at 1:30, so my hours were dictated. Like, you're there from 5 to 1:30 twice a week. So I was there 5 to 1:30 on Wednesdays and Fridays, and I had class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I always had a 3-day weekend. That was nice. Didn't mind that. Certainly.
Silver lining.
Yeah, certainly a sort of silver lining for sure. But my primary purpose as a social work intern there was to conduct intake assessments.
Intake assessments, what are those?
So people who are coming into the clinic for the first time and want to receive services, because we only took voluntary clients. We didn't have anyone court mandated in our facility.
I mean, I guess that has its ups and downs, but
yeah, I mean, I've never worked with any court mandated clients. I can say that. It hasn't been in my milieu. I've worked with involuntary clients in a psychiatric hospital, but not court mandated.
But not anybody who was forced to be there.
Right. I mean, technically, the involuntary clients are.
We'll put air quotes around that.
Yeah. They weren't being sent there under the threat of jail.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a good way. That's a good distinction to put there.
Because that's what court mandate is, essentially. Like, if you don't do what we say, you're going to go to prison.
But that, to me, that would be such a scary place to be.
Oh, it was.
Because, I mean, just because, I know what addiction looks like. Not that I am addicted. I know what that looks like. And the people who are not receiving that, there can be some very negative impacts on that. And then just being around that was,
I think the hardest thing for me in that position was seeing people younger than me, because I started that internship in my master's program at 22.
Yeah.
And seeing people in there younger than me hurt. Like, man, there are people already fully addicted to opiates and they're 19. Like, most of those cases, though, were injury related. So there were a lot of people who, as a teenager, like, had sports related injuries, and their doctors prescribed opiates, and then they just kept taking them and kept prescribing them and kept taking them.
But see, so was it, because this is where I'm trying to figure it out. So was it easy to separate that personal hurt that you felt between, like, your professional mindset?
At that time, not as much. not in my early stages of learning to be a social worker. Like, me now, sure.
You're just like, yeah, whatever. I stonewall it. That's no big deal.
Well, I'm not stonewalling. That's a negative communication technique that doesn't work. But I compartmentalize really well.
Okay.
As is necessary to do what I do, and have good coping strategies and self-care techniques.
Right, but at the beginning you didn't have that.
But no, at the beginning I was working with my fellow student who was probably 20 years my senior. And she talked about compartmentalizing all the time and how she was great at it. And so I did learn some things from her. And my other role at that internship was to co-facilitate a young adult support group. So we had ages 18 to 30. Mm-hmm. Just, we kind of had the go around. And a lot of the time, even though I was co-facilitator, I actually got to be sort of a pseudo participant at times and kind of jump in and immerse myself into the group, which was really neat. But it also really let you peer into the reality of these young adults who are struggling with addiction to, there were some people who, even though it was not recommended, it wasn't restricted, would bring in their young children. There was this father who brought in his 3 kids because there was no other option, and he knew and was dedicated to getting treatment.
Oh man, that's wild. That is such a crazy thing. Did that didn't deter you at all from the chosen path? That didn't scare you at all?
No. I was ready to be very thankful that whatever I was going to do next didn't require me to get up at 5 a.m.
Fair.
Be there at 5 a.m. I got up at 4, because the biggest benefit of that was that on Friday, since I didn't have class or work on Monday, Friday I was done at 1:30, so I had my whole afternoon to myself, and then a whole 3 days a weekend. So that was actually pretty neat. Although I'd be tired at like 7.
Right. So the job didn't scare you, but like even the experiences that you had in that, dealing with these people, that didn't scare you either.
No, but it taught me the most important thing I say that job or internship taught me was to be flexible.
In what way?
I was just very historically inflexible with schedules.
Okay.
So like I'd come in the morning and I'd look at my calendar and they would show me who's scheduled that I'm supposed to assess. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'd have nobody scheduled the first or second hour and be like, oh, I can relax and work on something else or read something for school or whatever. And then they would just throw somebody at me all of a sudden, and it would be really flustering for me.
Yeah, and you were just like, no, I don't have anybody scheduled. Like, I can't do this. Was it kind of that?
It was that, and it was also the fact that neither me nor my cohort who was there at that internship with me had an office to ourselves. We didn't even have like a workspace to ourselves. We were actually in the back of the building with the billing team because those were the only places that there were open computers. So we had to take a laptop and go into either the group room if it was open or somebody else's office if they weren't using it.
So it was kind of ramshackle. Okay.
Yeah, it was, the space wasn't big enough for all of us. Literally not big enough.
That's annoying in and of itself.
So it was a struggle. And I think that's more so what I was worried about, was like, I need a place to do this assessment. Mm-hmm. There was a time where I did the assessment in a nurse's office. There was a time where I did an assessment in the psychiatrist's office.
Did you ever have to do one in the bathroom?
No.
Okay. Then I think we're clear. I think that's a blessing in and of itself.
Yes. The one, because I only ever did one in the psychiatrist's office, and that one was very memorable. This guy had just gotten out of prison, and he had been in prison for 26 years.
Whoa.
So he had been in prison for longer than I had been alive at that time.
Holy cow.
He was just like in culture shock. He's like, cell phones and like,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because
I mean, this was 2012.
Yeah.
He had been in prison. Yeah, he'd been in prison since 86.
That is crazy. Okay, we're not going to get into it. We're not going to unpack that at all, because
I didn't get to unpack it much with him.
Oh, God.
But yeah, he immediately started using again when he got out of prison. And then...
Holy crap. No, yeah, I can imagine how rough that must be, but that makes me uncomfortable. Moving on.
Yeah, the whole prison industrial complex and how it sets people up for failure, yada yada. Moving on.
Oh God. Okay, cool, great. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you graduate, you finish your master's program. I'm assuming, since you're now working towards a PhD.
Yes, well, doctorate, but not PhD.
A doctorate, yeah. So what was the in between? Because you didn't immediately start towards your doctorate.
No, and that's not even possible in my profession.
Okay, so what was the in-between on that?
So, relevant to speaking a little bit to my second internship, I worked for a company called College Community Services, which is an outpatient mental health facility, and ended up working for them again when I was in Orange County, although I had 2 other jobs before that were less meaningful and career-focused. Mm-hmm. Still useful experiences, but my primary experience and the one that got me my licensing hours and therefore my license was then actually working for pay at College Community Services in Orange County because I got a glowing recommendation from the regional director over in Kern County.
And so,
which
and
was
this was
very
directed
nice.
towards, like, I'm assuming college students.
So it wasn't, and college had nothing to do with anything. It was just
Oh,
the name.
cool. Let's clear this up because I was all confused then.
Yeah, I was too at first. It's like that's just the name of the place. The parent company was called Providence Community Services, which made
Okay.
more sense. And then it all got bought out by an insurance company. This whole behavioral health company got bought out by an insurance company, so they wouldn't have to, or not insurance company, health provider, major health provider, so they wouldn't have to create their own behavioral health branch.
Okay.
So I worked there for 25 months, 2 years and a month, and got all my licensing hours, had a lot of meaningful experiences, got to work with a very diverse group of people in both case management and psychotherapy, consistently did and learned how to run my own group therapy, which was a very useful experience because at first it was scary and now I love it. Like, I will dive into a group therapy. Just like I love having multiple people in there where I don't have, I mean, it's great because you actually don't have to do all the work. There's other people to discuss things.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I like couples therapy as well. It's like I'm not the only one providing insight. The couple or group are providing insight to each other as well.
So if you're that comfortable with group meetings, would you, so, and I guess this is kind of tangential, but are like AA meetings considered, I guess, like where you could find a social worker? Is that more just like volunteer?
Well, AA meetings are community led.
Okay.
If you had a social worker there who was struggling with alcoholism, then yes.
Okay. All right. So the question leading up to that is like, could somebody ever find you in an AA meeting since you're such a fan of group therapy?
Well, AA meetings and 12-step meetings in general are not designed to be therapeutic in that context of psychotherapeutic. They're more for building camaraderie and understanding between peers who are experiencing the same plight.
Okay, gotcha.
Because I've been to them and I've supported clients through that process and starting that process, whether it be AA or NA or other things, because there's so many 12-step groups for various things, and they work for some people and they don't for others. But I really like group therapy in general as modality, and like moving forward when I left, so leaving California and going to Oklahoma because my wife got a job there. That was my first and finally my opportunity to work at a hospital.
Okay.
And I was super, super excited because I applied to a bunch of things. I got 2 interviews and managed to schedule them both in the same weekend because I was still living in California at the time, finishing up my licensing. Flew to Oklahoma, had an interview on a Friday and a Monday, and thankfully got the job at the hospital and didn't get the other job because that job would have been horrible because one of my colleagues who started a month before I did at the hospital was also working at that place, and she said it was absolutely horrible and there was no work-life balance.
Glowing reviews. Got it.
Yeah. So she's like, yeah, I'm so glad you didn't work for that place because they suck.
Right. So what was your title at the hospital?
Just social worker.
So basically now you're at the point where when you were with your friend in the hospital, that man you had that conversation with, that social worker, were you in that same position then?
I thought I was going to be.
Okay, this is
I
going
was
to be
in
great.
A similar-esque position.
Yeah.
But at that point, 5 years later, most hospitals had completely changed how their social work departments function. So I was in the care management department, which was made up of nurse case managers and social workers. And most of the time, it really felt like the social workers played second fiddle to the nurses. Our department was led by nurses. So like my supervisor and my manager were nurses.
Yeah.
There wasn't anybody to really represent me and my fellow social workers. There were fewer of us. We got paid less and sometimes had to fill in for the nurse case managers and do stuff that we weren't necessarily trained to do. And I was very reluctant to do because once I got my license, I'm very responsible for the activities that I participate in, and they need to be within my scope of practice so that I'm not essentially committing malpractice by practicing outside of my scope.
Right. Which you don't want to happen.
Right. I don't want that to happen ever. So I was I was there for a while and I was reasonably happy with the job. I got unique hours. I was working there Friday to Monday, 10-hour shifts. That was nice because I had Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays off, which was especially nice after then we had a child and I could spend 3/7 of the week home with him and actually just, be like a full-time, part-time dad.
Right.
Instead of just like I'm here in the evenings kind of dad. And that was really nice.
So was that job at that hospital a major growing point for you in terms of social work and I guess finding your place in that community in that specific profession?
Yes, actually, it was. So going there from clinical work, from being a therapist, to going to non-clinical work and not having any opportunity to engage in any clinical work was kind of aggravating. So July of last year, I was still at Mercy, but was actively looking for other work. And I had just had my tonsils out. Do not recommend as an adult, but if you got to get it done, got to get it done. Bearing a lot more information than I usually tell the general public, but I, because of the medication that I was on and that I was placed on after that surgery, which was an opiate, because it's a lot of pain when you get things ripped out of the back of your mouth. And I ended up in what's called a hypomanic state. So not a full-blown mania.
Right.
Felt really good and motivated and didn't need very much sleep. Got a lot of exercise, but I didn't do anything dangerous or reckless. So that's why it's hypomanic, not manic. And that is when I signed up for BetterHelp. Decided I'm going to be a therapist again because I love being a therapist.
Whoa, wait a minute. You were in this crazy state and you decided, yeah, that's cool. Let's apply for this.
Yeah. I mean, I knew because it's an independent contractor position. You take on as many clients as you want or as few as you want. So there wasn't really any pressure if I got accepted, which I did. And, by the time I actually started working, I was no longer in that state. But it's also when I decided to make the final decision to apply for my doctorate. So both of those happened within a 2-week span of time. And
well, then
I've followed through on both of them. One of them is now my full-time job, and one I started last month and will be done with in 27 months.
I mean, that last bit kind of sounds like my little adventure with starting this podcast. I had this idea when I was in college. I was like, I'm going to start a magazine and called it The Common Tongue. That never happened. And then in the middle of quarantine, I look over to my wife and I was like, you remember that magazine I talked about when I was in my senior year of college? She vaguely remembers it. And I was like, I'm going to do a podcast about that. And now here we are. 3 months later, I'm quitting my job, moving to Oregon, and hopefully going to make this work. So props to you, man. I understand that feeling. Okay.
So I know we're getting closer to being out of time, but just to get to present day, essentially.
Yeah.
So between that, last summer and now, I was doing BetterHelp part-time on the side, maintaining at first 10 clients. And then at one point I kind of balanced out around 30 clients while still doing my full-time job and making, a few $100s on the side, anywhere between $400 and $800.
Wow.
And it's just kind of a little side thing. It was nice to be able to have some extra spending money, essentially, that I could use on whatever without impacting our budget.
Yeah.
And that was nice. And at the same time, so also in July, I had applied for and then got interviewed for a position at a psychiatric hospital, which was also the one that my hospital that I worked at partnered with. So whenever they needed to send patients for medical clearance to make sure that they were medically okay to go into the psychiatric hospital, because it was a standalone hospital and was not affiliated specifically or connected to a regular hospital. So people had to be in good enough physical health because they didn't have stuff to take care of them, essentially. So they would send them to the ER at the hospital I worked at, and I would hear the name of the facility a lot. So I started looking into it and applied for a job and got offered the job after 10 minutes in my interview because they were kind of desperate. Although I didn't get the actual hours that I was requesting because I wanted to work day 12-hour shifts. And they're like, well, we don't have days available. We have nights. So I said, well, I would love the job, but I need to talk to my wife because I've never worked nights and we have a child and I need to make sure that we can make that work.
Understandably so, yeah. Because now you're married, now you have a kid. It's not just like, yeah,
Right.
cool, I'll take the job.
So we did make it work, and I started working 12-hour shifts from 7 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. because half-hour lunch. So I was there from those times, Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night. And it was hard to flip-flop, though, because I was still responsible for caring for my son on my days off. So Sunday I would come home, sleep for like 4 hours, and then force myself to stay up the rest of the day so that I could go back to sleep at night at a regular time, flip my schedule back to days. And then Wednesday night, I would stay up all night. I would do a stream and then like stream for like 4 or 5 hours. And then a lot of the time, at that time, I was training for races that I did back in January. And I would go out on like runs at 2 a.m, long, like half marathon distance, 13-mile
I'll
runs.
pass on that. I will gladly pass on that. That is all you, Josh. You can have that to yourself. Can't do running.
Yeah. Overall, I enjoyed that position, and it got me another position there. My last 2 months there, I was the clinical manager, which was cool. It was a brand new position that had been introduced. I was the first one to take it, and I was also the last one to take it because they got rid of it.
Well, at least you have that under your belt. You have the first and only position at a hospital.
Yeah, because they're like, yeah, I don't think we need this position right now. I mean, they were also struggling financially because the impact of COVID was really getting to them. The census was way down, and people were starting to be forced to take days off, and it was not great.
Now we come to the crux. So we have about 10-ish minutes left. And here, this is where I wanted to, and I know this is probably where we should have, started maybe, but so having all these experiences, but seeing the impact of your friend in the hospital and then working on your master's and then working at the internships, working at the hospital, all this culminated into who you are now, right? This is your career path.
Yes.
Seeing everything that's been happening in the last year with COVID, with the BLM, with everything that is happening, I feel like social work has a negative connotation attached to it. Would you agree?
Generally, yes. Unfortunately,
I know, and this is where I feel like the conversation needs to go now towards the end. Now that we've reached the climax of this, but do you feel like the connotation behind like what social work and what social workers feel? Do you feel like that needs to change now because of what's happening with the BLM movement and with everybody being stuck at home and all these things that have been happening now in the last year? Do you feel like people are starting to change their mindset on what social work is and what it looks like?
I don't think that there's been a lot of direct involvement. So we have the National Association of Social Workers here in the United States. They make a lot of questionable decisions. The stands that they make, though, are good generally.
Right.
Even though there's surprisingly a lot of dissension from some social workers when I see their posts on Facebook. And then a lot of other social workers are like, you realize that this profession is politically charged, right? Like specifically.
Really? In what way?
Well, I want to use that to talk a little bit about the ethical principles of social work. If you truly are a social worker and follow the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics that was approved back in 1996 and has been revised, our core values are service, social justice, dignity and worth of a person, importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence.
Okay.
And these are what we're all supposed to aspire to. And if you want me to, I can actually read their short details about what each one is supposed to look like. I think it's really important for people to understand social work to hear these. I mean, it'll probably take like 2 minutes.
No, yeah, let's go for it. Yeah. Sounds good.
Service is that social workers elevate service to others above self-interest. We draw on our knowledge, values, and skills to help people in need and address social problems. We're encouraged to volunteer some portion of our professional skills with no expectation of significant financial return, so pro bono, which I do. Social justice, so we challenge social injustice. We pursue social change, particularly with and on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed individuals and groups of people. We're primarily focused on issues of poverty, unemployment, discrimination, and other forms of social injustice. We actively seek to promote sensitivity to and knowledge about oppression and cultural and ethnic diversity. We strive to ensure access to needed information, services, and resources, equality of opportunity, and meaningful participation in decision-making for all people.
Aha. So maybe it was a good thing that you read that.
Yes.
So the reason why I brought up that question, and I guess you reading this has brought it, I guess, kind of back full circle now. With everything that's been happening with the BLM movement, you see everybody on Facebook saying like defund the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they're saying, or at least from my understanding, what I understand that they're saying is like not necessarily, just strip funds from the police, but allocate the funds in different positions, right?
Yes.
So what I mean, I guess the question that I want to ask is like, do you feel that social work needs to come more to the forefront with what's been happening?
100%.
Cool. Why? This is the opinion that I want, because I feel like not enough people get it from the source, from people who work in it.
So when I was watching the video of, man, there's been so much stuff that I can't remember
so
people's
much
names.
Stuff. Yeah.
But the man who got shot when he was trying to get back into his vehicle with his kids in it, and I was watching the video of that, and I was like, I was thinking, because I'm really well trained in de-escalation. It's one of the things I didn't talk about through my professional experience, but while I was working at the first hospital, I got to teach a class about it. For a year and a half.
So you're like the master class on de-escalation.
So yeah, like verbal de-escalation, and I taught the physical skills too.
Okay.
Which were all non-combative and used to guide and restrict if necessary, and defend ourselves. But I was looking at that situation and I was like, if I was there in plain clothes or even just like business casual, I was just looking at the situation, what was said, and I could have de-escalated that. I mean, I don't know that 100%, sure, because I'm not in the situation.
Right, you're not
just
there.
Looking at the facts of it and watching an actual video, like if I had been standing between people shooting and that gentleman, I could have talked to that person. But that's just not. De-escalation is just not there when you see these videos.
Man,
like police like to de-escalate with physical force.
Yeah,
it's what they're trained to do, and we're not.
So I guess with that, now the flip side of that question is, do you feel like if the stance goes to where people feel like, no, the police need to be where they're at, maybe not bring in social workers, maybe not bring in all this allocation of funds, do you think that it would be prudent if people in law enforcement or people who work in that dangerous field where you are in those situations, would it be prudent that they learn these social work, like the skills of social workers and like de-escalation, in not necessarily psychotherapy but like behavioral sciences? Like would that be beneficial at least to put into their training?
Yeah, I think that it would make a lot more sense for police officers to have some more formal training, or even require a degree program of some sort.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people feel that way.
And I've seen that reflected out there, and it honestly just, it makes sense.
Right. It's common sense at this point. If you work in a situation like that, you have to be able to use both sides. You have to be able to know when to use force and know when to use your words.
Yeah. Words have a lot of power. And I actually have a client right now, a therapy client, who is a lawyer. And we had a meaningful discussion about how police enforce the laws, but they really have no idea what they are. They don't study law.
Okay, cool. That's a whole, because I think I know who you're talking about, and he and I might have a conversation on that soon. So that's
yes, you do know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly. Okay, cool. Yeah. Great. Cool. Then he and I are going to have a lot of fun with this. So I guess not necessarily in closing, what is one thing that you wish people knew or understood more about social workers and what it is that you do?
So at our core, social workers are trained to be agents of change. We are there to enact positive social change in the micro, meso, and macro levels. So at, person to person is micro, meso is like families,
right,
and groups, and macro is communities and up, like nations, the whole world. That's really the purpose of the social work profession, is to enact positive change and we see a lot of information about being called change agents or agents of change. And, it's not that necessarily in certain contexts we are causing the change. We're just encouraging and motivating other people to make the changes that they already have the power to make, but they just may not recognize that they have it.
I guess that's an interesting way to put it. You're not necessarily forcing change, but you're kind of just scooting people along, just to be like, hey, pay attention to this. Like, look at it this way. I guess another question to end this: what is one topic that you wish people paid attention more to or put more research into? Aha, now we're making you think.
Yeah, because that's a really broad question.
Okay, then what is a modern issue that you have seen, I guess either personally or with people who you work with, even in your own family? What is one thing that you see that you wish more people would pay attention to? I guess if that makes sense.
Believing women who have been sexually assaulted.
Ooh, okay.
A majority of my caseload are women, and I mean, I can't give statistics off the top of my head because I don't know them exactly.
Right.
But I'd bet on looking at my caseload that a majority of them have had something inappropriately done to them sexually without their consent.
That hits a little close to home because I know people, very personally in my life, very close to me, who that has happened to them, and that, ooh, wow, that came out of left field. I'm going to be 100% honest. That is not what I was expecting, but that, food for thought, I guess.
Well,
Wow.
The other one would have been abortion. So
yeah, no, we're not getting into that. That is a huge topic, which I don't want to get tangled up in right now, because that is, that's a horse of a different color. Let's put it that way. Wow. This has actually been very eye-opening. I really enjoyed doing this. I had a lot of fun talking with you, Josh. This
was great.
And this is fun too, because now everybody gets to see it on the internet as a Twitch VOD.
Yeah, they can watch me standing with this brilliant NASA picture of a nebula behind me.
I think I actually have that picture because I used to be an astrophysics major. And wait, that looks like a supernova that has happened. And am I wrong in that? That's real nice looking.
Yeah, I really like this picture. I have the picture. I don't remember if I named it appropriately that I can link back to it. I'm sure I could find it again.
Well, okay. So everybody watching on Twitch, thank you for tuning in, at least for my segment of this. This has been a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing this. Hopefully you guys found out something interesting. On my end, thank you for listening. And I guess, Josh, I'll see you on Twitch. I'm going to stay tuned in. I enjoy what you guys do. So, everybody on Twitch knows where to find you. But for those who are just listening, where can everybody find you, Josh?
So you can find me at twitch.tv/Unigeek, which is UNIG33K.
Cool.
Yeah, and we're also on Facebook under the same name, Instagram under the same name, Twitter is Unigeekverse, so just add verse like universe onto the end. Those are the places you can also find us. YouTube as well, though we haven't posted anything in practically ever. That's not our focus.
Yeah. And who knows, if you're very lucky and in the state of Maryland, you just might find him on BetterHelp if you need somebody to talk to.
Yeah, at least once I get my license here.
That's okay.
If you live in California or Oklahoma right now, you're a lot more likely to get paired up with me, especially if you ask for a male and you ask somebody who has specialization with LGBTQ plus clients.
Well, there you go. Hopefully somebody will find you, and hopefully people found this informative. So thank you for doing this, Josh. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you had fun doing this too.
Yeah, as a therapist, it's nice to be able to talk about myself occasionally.
I can't imagine. That's good to hear. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna cut it from here, and then you can continue with what you're doing, sir.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you could, give us a like, give us a follow, give us 5 stars, write us a review. If you'd like, send us an email at tctpodcasts@gmail.com. That's tctpodcasts@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to stay updated on what we're doing. And if you have a moment, go check us out on Kickstarter. Maybe consider pledging. Just share it with your friends. That would mean a lot to us over here. And we will definitely see you on the next one.